There is a doll that has terrorized the world for over 50 years. A doll that shouldn't exist, but does. A doll that chooses its own victims. Her name is Annabelle, and if you've never heard of her, maybe that's for the best. Because anyone who knows her story will never be able to look at a doll the same way again. They say she's responsible for at least 7 deaths. They say she moves on her own when no one's looking. They say she whispers in her victims' ears before. Well, you'll find out. Today, I'm going to tell you the true story of Annabelle. Not the Hollywood movie version. Not the distorted legends circulating on the internet. The real story. The story that has kept Ed and Lorraine Warren, the world's most famous demonologists, awake at night for decades. So dim the lights, turn up the volume, because you're about to meet the most cursed doll that ever existed. Our story begins in 2025, but not as you would expect, because sometimes sleeping legends awaken when we least expect it. For 50 years, Annabelle remained silent, trapped, asleep, waiting. At Ed and Lorraine Warren's Museum of the Occult, she sat motionless within her sacred glass, watching the thousands of visitors who came to see her each year. But in 2025, something changed. For the first time in half a century, someone was brave enough, or foolish enough, to free her from her prison. Dan Rivera, a paranormal investigator who believed Annabelle was just a hoax, a legend created to attract tourists. He was convinced he could prove that the world's most feared doll was nothing more than an ordinary doll. Dan created a tour called Devil on the Run, taking Annabelle to several cities. Thousands of people got to see her up close for the first time in decades. But 3 days after releasing her, Dan Rivera was found dead in his hotel room. No injuries, no explanation, and with a look of pure terror on his face. Coincidence? The Warrens always said Annabelle doesn't believe in coincidences. When Ed and Lorraine Warren walked into Donna's apartment, they knew immediately they weren't dealing with a simple haunting. This was something much older, much more powerful. Lorraine, with her clairvoyant abilities, was the first to realize. "It's not the doll that's possessed," she said. "There's an entity using the doll as an anchor to manifest itself in our world." Ed was even more blunt. "This isn't a ghost, it's a demon, and it's just getting started." The Warrens discovered that the entity had falsely presented itself to Donna and Angie as the spirit of a dead girl named Annabelle Higgins. A diabolical lie to gain the young women's trust. "Demons don't possess objects," Ed explained. "They use objects to get close to humans. This entity's true intention is to possess a human soul." The Warrens performed a containment ritual that lasted 3 full days. They surrounded the doll with holy water, consecrated salt, and specific prayers of protection. Then, they sealed Annabelle inside a specially blessed glass jar. "This isn't just glass," Ed warned. "It's a sacred prison. As long as it remains here, the entity cannot fully manifest itself." For 50 years, Annabelle has stood there. Millions have visited the Museum of the Occult to see her, with signs everywhere. "Do not touch. Do not provoke. Do not challenge." Until Dan Rivera arrived, convinced he could unmask Annabelle's hoax. He had no idea he was about to unleash something he had spent 5 decades preparing for freedom. When Annabelle was removed from her sacred prison for the first time in half a century, witnesses reported immediate phenomena. The temperature in the museum plummeted. Some visitors fainted without explanation, and staff swore they saw the doll's eyes move. But Dan ignored all the signs. He had studied the case for years and was convinced it was all mass hysteria fueled by Hollywood movies. The Devil on the Run tour kicked off in Boston. 5,000 people showed up the first day. Dan was ecstatic. He would finally prove that the Annabelle legend was just that, a legend. But on the first night, strange things started happening. Dan's assistant, Sarah Mitchell, noticed that the doll's position changed during the night. "I'd have her facing forward," she said months later. "And in the morning she'd be turned around, as if she'd spent the night watching visitors." In the second city, Philadelphia, the first accident occurred. Marcus Johnson, a 34-year-old visitor, suffered a massive heart attack right in front of Annabelle's window. No medical history, no explanation. But what really disturbed the team was what 6 different witnesses reported. At the exact moment of Marcus's death, the doll smiled. Dan still tried to rationalize it. Coincidence, he insisted. But Annabelle was just beginning to show her true power. The tour continued to Hartford, Connecticut. It was to be the last stop before returning the doll to the museum. But they never made it to Hartford. On the night of January 17th, Dan decided to stay alone with Annabelle at the hotel. He wanted to make scientific observations to document any paranormal activity. At 11:43 p.m., Dan posted his final photo on Instagram, him smiling next to Annabelle, with the caption, "Keeping an old friend company. So far, no supernatural activity. Time to put this legend to rest." At 3:47 a.m., the chambermaid found the bedroom door ajar. When she entered, she discovered Dan Rivera dead in the center of the room, with an expression of absolute terror on his face. Annabelle's glass was intact, but completely empty. The doll was gone. There were no signs of a break-in. The cameras didn't show anyone coming or going. It was as if Annabelle had simply broken free. And on the bathroom mirror, written in what looked like condensation, was a message. "Miss me? Did you miss me?" The same handwriting as the notes that terrified Donna in 1971. Annabelle was back, and more powerful than ever. Dan Rivera's story joins a long list of people who have defied Annabelle and paid the price. In 1980, Father Jason Bradford visited the museum as a skeptic. He touched the glass and challenged, "If you are real, do something to me now." Nothing happened during the visit. On the way back, his car mysteriously veered off the road. Father Bradford survived, but was in a coma for 3 weeks. When he woke up, his first words were, "She was in the back seat. I saw her in the mirror before the accident." In 1995, Tommy and Amanda Stevens visited the museum during their honeymoon. Tommy decided to impress his wife by teasing Annabelle, banging on the glass, and mocking the doll. They never made it home. The car was found overturned on a road that wasn't even on their route. Tommy died on impact. Amanda survived, but with total amnesia. Years later in therapy, Amanda began to remember. There was a child in the back seat, a little girl with red hair. She was laughing. And there are dozens of other cases. Museum employees who reported nightmares after working near the doll. Visitors who challenged Annabelle and then suffered unexplained accidents. Ed Warren Warren always said, Annabelle isn't just possessed. She's a door, and she chooses very carefully who to punish. Before he died, Ed himself confessed, of all the cursed objects we've encountered, Annabelle is the only one that still haunts me, because I know she's always waiting. And so we come to the end of the story? Or is it just the beginning of a new chapter? Annabelle has remained missing since Dan Rivera's death. Some believe she was stolen. Others believe she simply broke free for good. But I have a question for you. What do you think is scarier? Believing that there is a demonic doll choosing its victims? Or living in a world where inexplicable deaths happen and our minds create terrors to try to explain the inexplicable? Because if Annabelle is real, it means there are forces beyond our understanding. Entities that can use ordinary objects to torment us. And if it's not real, well, it means our own imaginations are capable of creating legends so powerful that people die because of them. So tell me in the comments, do you believe in the legend of Annabelle? Or do you think it's just our human need to find supernatural explanations for the inexplicable? And if you're wondering where Annabelle is now, maybe it's best not to find out. Good night. And remember, some legends never die. They just wait for the right moment to awaken.